Hello everyone. So third meta principle, yeah. When breaking a principle, be more careful. This is of course very important. As was stated previously, principles only offer guidance. However, when a principle should work but you think it does not, that necessarily requires more time spent on the clock to justify your reasoning, of course. So you don't want to play an exception very quickly because by definition exceptions are few and far between, and you need to take time to consider if they work or not in the specific position. So while a principle should work in many situations, when you think you found an exception, think again. Be very careful. Being wrong can be highly costly, even if the principle is as minor as something like double pawns are a weakness and that they are immobile. That's not a hugely important principle. We'll take a look at that later. But if you do break it and you're wrong about that, you might suffer the loss of the game even. So be very careful. So the corollary here or sub-principle is not that if you are applying a principle, you should not be careful. When you're breaking a principle, you should be careful, and when you're applying one, you should be careful as well. There is always a minimum level of caution that must be exercised. Of course, though, when you're breaking a principle, that simply necessitates more carefulness, but that doesn't mean that when you're applying a principle, you should be easygoing either. So yeah, take note of that, guys. Alright, guys, so let's take a look at this game between Carlsen and Nakamura. So it starts out as a normal Spanish Berlin with d3, and then this g6, a bit of a rare line. Both sides simply developing their pieces. The classic Ruy Lopez maneuver, and the knight finally gets to g3. Black breaks in the center, very important. White is trying to prevent this bishop g4 idea. Black continues expanding on the queen side and now plays bishop e6, solidifying the center. And now Nakamura, here in this specific position, there's a very interesting decision that Nakamura goes for. So he spends about a minute, a significant amount of time considering the time control, but not too much, I mean, but it's still rather significant. The time control was about 15 minutes. And he starts considering the ramifications of a move like bishop d2, which breaks the principle of avoid half-developing moves such as bishop d2, bishop d7. This is actually, bishop d2 and bishop d7 are played so often, and they're usually incorrect because they're half-developing moves. This is another principle we'll talk about. And yeah, it even gets a principle of its own, this bishop d2. So he could have put the bishop on e3 or played d4, but instead he chose to break the principle. So bishop e3 or d4 would not really be breaking any principles. So instead he chose to break the principle, and this was actually a good decision because the bishop is poised to allow for ideas such as queen c1, attacking h6, and support c3 and b4. So the bishop sorry, my bad. I keep with the arrows. The arrows, it's never good. So this helps support this one as well. Queen c1 will come, whereupon there will be tremendous pressure on h6, and this actually happened in the game. But I didn't include this entire game because I didn't think it was really relevant. Anyway, so these are the virtues of bishop d2, and while it does break a principle, it is actually a good move. Unfortunately, GM Nakamura went on to lose the game, but after many adventures. This bishop d2 was not to blame. This bishop d2 here. So this bishop d2, he spent some time on the clock considering the ramifications of breaking this principle. And in my mind, that's very intelligent by Nakamura, because I bet he was thinking, yeah, bishop d2, usually that's not a good idea. So he was probably thinking of bishop e3. So that's it for our famous game. So this will be the other game we have here. It was an insane game, and actually a lot was talked about this game. It got a lot of attention. It was played in the FIDE Online Olympiad. Dark Angel is actually I am Fadi Eid. And yeah, let's go on with the game. starts out as a kind of modern defense. He plays a4 to prevent a6 usually prepares this idea, so white intelligently prevents that. The bishop still comes to b6 anyway, and the pieces are getting developed pieces, all good. Castle's short, usually you want to castle long in this line, but of course now with this structure, especially with a4, castling long is less intelligent. So the pieces are put on the c file, some remaneuvering here, classic middle game, lots of remaneuvering. White is trying to control the open file. Black plays a rather strange move here, but yeah, it's actually effective. And he starts making use of tactics over here. I think this allowing before wasn't so good, because now this tactic is actually quite fine for black, even more so. I mean, white loses the bishop pair, and he gets this rather weak pawn here, and there is a lot of pressure on this backward pawn on the c file. Anyway, so let's go on with the game. It's not really relevant for our purposes to consider the entire game. And let me just make sure at what move I want to stop. Yes, okay, so we're getting there. So look at this king on h3, huh? Reminds you of something, huh? And now, okay, so after bishop e3, I mean, white here is down a pawn, right? And probably if these pawns get rated, he'll be closer to a draw, but still the bishop is rather strong. But you know what? Here, I am Fadi Eid finds a brilliant idea. So he's, by the way, another star of Lebanese chess, the highest rated Lebanese chess player ever at 2400 plus at his peak. So this, what happens here, okay, I'll just break it to you guys. So if you want to pause the video, find out the move. If you don't, listen to this. This is what happens. This king walk that I am Fadi 8 does, it reminds one of GM Nigel Short against GM Jan Timman in 1991. So I gave you all of the details, you can check out the game. And despite having a little under 2 minutes on the clock, I am Fadi 8 makes sure to spend time when he wants to break this principle. It's one of the most important principles here, obviously. What is the principle? Yeah, when you're I mean, no, not when you're the most important principle is keep your king safe. So Fadi 8 embarks on a journey here, and let's watch what happens. This is really brilliant. So he goes h4, g5, and he wants to go h6 and checkmate black. Not like this, he wants to do this. So this is rather brilliant. And this reminds one entirely, look at this, due to the pin, the pawn cannot be captured. So back here, the queen cannot be captured because of the pin. So yeah, that was rather brilliant by Fadi 8. Look at that, king comes to f6. Queen has to be sacrificed, and some precision here by I am Fadi 8, and he gets the checkmate. So brilliant game. It got a lot of buzz, obviously, for very obvious reasons. And yeah, just an all-around brilliant game. So yeah, but look at this. I want to return back to this point to drive home the point. So here he has 1 minute and 56 seconds. Look at how low his time goes, 1 minute and 2 seconds. He spends basically a minute figuring out the ramifications of the king move. Because when you come here, there's no going back. You either are going to get checkmated or you're going to be one checkmating black. And what I really love about this game is that I am Fadi 8, there is a bishop, like in the Nigel Short Jan Timman game, there wasn't a bishop controlling the dark squares or potentially controlling the dark squares, potentially doing something like this, spinning these guys, winning them if, like, let's say the rook is here. So this is maybe even cuter than the Nigel Short game. Yeah, and with that, I hope you got something out of the video, guys. So remember, when breaking a principle, be careful, spend time on the clock, don't just rush into it. Yeah, take care, guys.